Welcome back to Two Keto Dudes. This is Carl Franklin from Connecticut in the United States. And in February 2016, I put myself on a ketogenic diet to take control of my metabolism. In just 2.5 months, I managed to reverse all my markers of type 2 diabetes with diet alone. As of now, I'm 80 pounds lighter with no signs of diabetes or heart disease.
Hi, I'm Richard Morris in Canberra, Australia. I've been on a ketogenic diet since April of 2014. When I started, I was very sick with complications from type 2 diabetes. And within 6 months of starting a ketogenic diet, all of my biomarkers of disease had disappeared. I've lost about 100 pounds. I've completely turned my health around.
And this show is a document of our experiences thriving for years in nutritional ketosis.
Yeah, and reversing diabetes.
Woohoo! And hopefully that might help a few people who are curious about this kind of dietary hacking.
Yeah, we're not doctors. We don't want to give anyone any medical advice, but we are keen to share our own experiences. We're actually both software developers, so we're not afraid of a little technical detail, are we, Carl?
I'm going to drag and drop a big no on that statement.
But we do read the effing manuals, and we have done some research into our own deranged metabolisms and the science behind them, and we share studies that we've found in the show notes.
You'll probably work out pretty quickly that we're both foodies. We love to cook, and we love to eat.
Yep.
In every episode, we both share a keto recipe that cannot be ignored.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start podcast number 123, Joe Kosterich, low-carb physician.
Heard you say you're due for a little.
So, Richard, do we have any apologies or corrections from last week's show?
Let's see. Last week's show was Sarah Hallberg reversing diabetes, and the only apology I had was for my lack of voice.
You sound better now.
Yeah, I feel a lot better. The flu's moved over past me, and now I've just got like a bit of a residual sort of cough every now and then, but I'm good.
Wow, I can't tell you how relieved I am that you wouldn't be bringing the typhoid Mary to Keto Fest.
I'm bringing the pestilence.
Yes,
straight from Gary Taubes.
I thought you said it might have been Ivan and Dmitry having the vodka on the plane next to you.
Two Russians, yeah, they were doing a bit of coughing, but no, I claim now that it was Gary Taubes. I had a better quality of cold.
Well, he won't be at Keto Fest. He's one of the only rock stars that won't be at Keto Fest, but... So let's revisit what a ketogenic diet is, Richard.
Yeah, so a ketogenic diet is a diet that puts you in a state of nutritional ketosis. That simply means you don't eat carbohydrates, or you eat very little, and your body makes glucose. And when it makes glucose, it also makes ketones. And ketones and fat is how our bodies run when we're on a ketogenic diet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a surefire way to get into nutritional ketosis is to eat 20 grams of carbs or less per day. Mostly from green leafy vegetables, maybe a little cream, some nuts. Your protein is moderate. That's 1 to 1.5 grams of protein every day for every kilogram of lean body mass you have. Mm-hmm. And then all the other energy, as Richard said, we get from fat. Lovely, delicious fat. Mm-hmm. So how was your week, my friend? As I said, your voice sounds better.
Yeah, I've had a good week. I've been doing some woodworking. I've been building some bookshelves for this house that we've just moved into.
Nice.
And I'm also going to build an audio isolation room out of plywood. And,
nice.
That's really for professional podcasting. So the room I'm in right now, it's got a lot of reflective audio surfaces, and so it's a little bit echoey. You'll notice the audio quality improve out of sight when I finish that.
Awesome. That's great.
So how was your week, Carl?
Oh, I had a long week. I was working on Keto Fest. It was a great week, though, of course. I got the rentals all taken care of, the tents and tables and chairs and all that. I got the projector and screen for the Crocker House. The Kickstarter T-shirts are ordered.
Nice.
I finally got everybody to give me their details, most of them anyway. Got a list of 50 or so volunteers ready to help get stuff done.
Thank you very much, people.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I got the titles and abstracts from all the speakers, which you can read at schedule.2keto.com. That's a work in progress, by the way. Got the cooking demo dishes defined.
Excellent.
We also put the yoga class and walking tour tickets on the website, ketofest.com.
Excellent.
Oh, and after Keto Fest, Taffy Elrod, as I said in the intro there, is doing 3-hour hands-on cooking lessons at RD86 Space.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those recipes look awesome.
They do, yeah. That's going to be the Monday, and if those classes fill up, she'll do more on Tuesday and on through Wednesday if necessary.
Nice.
And on top of that, I've been writing code for my day job and having fun with that.
Yeah.
We were also on Jimmy Moore's podcast this week.
Oh, we were. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That was fun. We're talking about Keto Fest.
Yeah, we recorded that last week. And earlier, we talked to Carrie Brown.
Yes, we did.
Last weekend. We can't wait for her shows to emerge.
Yeah, those will come out after Keto Fest, probably.
Probably, yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, I had a great week.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot one thing.
Okay.
I passed all my subjects at university.
Yes, congratulations, my friend.
Kicking ass. So, yeah. I mean, I would have liked higher results, and I'm going to need a higher GPA if I want to get fast-tracked into a PhD program.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, that's the goal. I've got some research I want to do, and the whole point of studying biochemistry is to basically have a good, firm foundation with which to do that. But I had a few distractions over the past 6 months. So, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to be buying another house during exam week again, and or family funerals hopefully during exam week, and all that. So anyway, I'm pretty happy with the results, and onward and upward from here.
So are we. That's great stuff. I can't wait till we have to change the intro to say we're not doctors, because you will be.
No, I still won't be a doctor. I won't be I won't be anyone else's doctor.
Well, it might be piled higher and deeper, PhD.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, Richard, let's give away some swag.
Yeah, every show we pick a lucky winner at random from the members of our 2 Keto Dudes fan club.
Yes, and today we're giving away a treasure trove of stuff from vendors we like, all of which you can find at giveaway.2keto.com or fanclub.2keto.com.
So who's our winner this week?
Today's winner is Robin Root. Yeah.
Congratulations, Robin.
Awesome.
So, Carl, let's tell everybody what Robin has won.
Well, the first thing we're giving away is a 2 Keto Dudes coffee mug that says keep calm and keto on.
That's very good advice. And we're also giving away a signed copy of Lies My Doctor Told Me by Dr. Ken Berry.
And a packet of Peak Tea, recommended by Dr. Jason Fung and others to support fasting. It's a dehydrated instant green tea with many flavors. Just add water and you've got an amazing tea, iced or hot, that will help you with your fasting efforts.
We're also giving away a cheese-making kit from Pamela Zorn.
Yes, we're putting one of these kits in the Keto Fest attendee bag, and she's going to do a cheese-making demo at Keto Fest.
Outstanding. And if you don't want to wait to win some swag, you can always buy all sorts of it online at gear.2keto.com.
Yes. Congratulations, Robin. And that brings us right up to mail!
Okay, Carl, what do you got?
This one comes right out of the ketogenic forums, and it's entitled Concerned Call from PCP's Nurse, Primary Care Provider.
Mm-hmm.
I have a physical coming up with my PCP in a week and had to get some blood tests done. I've been keto since February. Here's how the conversation went. Nurse: Hi, is this Mr. So-and-so? Me: Yes, it is. Nurse: Hi, this is Dr. Yada Yada's office. Nurse: We have your blood work back and need to discuss the results. Very concerned voice. Me: Okay, what's going on? Nurse: Well, there's 2 things that the doctor is concerned about. First is your LDL. That's the bad cholesterol. That number is 147. The normal range is less than 100. Me:
Oh, God.
Okay, what's the other concern? Nurse: Well, your fasting glucose is 111. This should be below 100. Me: What was my fasting insulin? Nurse: Let me see. Yes, that was 8.3. Oh, very good. The norm is 2 to 25. Me: I can explain. I started a ketogenic diet in February. My body is eating its own fat. Within about 2 years, I'll be at my ideal weight and my LDL will come down. There actually is no science that links high LDLs to heart disease. In fact, the complete opposite has been found. My sugars are a bit high because my muscles are now burning ketones. Given my reasonable insulin, I'm not diabetic and therefore not concerned. This is normal. Long pause. Me: A better indicator of heart disease is the relationship between triglycerides and HDL. What's my HDL? Nurse: Let me see. And in an excited voice: They went from 36 to 45. The norm is 39. Me: Awesome. What are my triglycerides? Long pause. Nurse, in a really excited voice, they went from 187 last year to 93. Norm is less than 150. Me, 1 sec, pulling calculator app off my phone. If you divide your total triglycerides by your HDL, you get a much better indicator of coronary artery disease. Less than 2 is great, 2 to 4 okay, and above 4 is a concern. So last year this number was about 5.2, not good. This year's number is around 2, excellent. Nurse, how did you do this? Me, I went on a ketogenic diet a few months ago. Nurse, did you lose any weight? Me, yes, about 40 pounds. Nurse, what? At that point, we spent the next few minutes with her quizzing me about this ketogenic diet thing, and I'd like to acknowledge Carl and Richard at this point. Had it not been for what I learned from the Two Keto Dudes podcast, I likely would have went on statins and off keto, which likely would have killed me. Thanks, guys. What you do is truly a vocation. You are so welcome.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I'd actually make a couple of comments about that. When I was put on statins, it was because my LDL went over 200, which is 200 milligrams per deciliter, the US measurement. That used to be the threshold. As soon as you go over 200, you'd get told to go on statins. And, of course, that deranged all my glucose control, and I went from being pre-diabetic to frank type 2 diabetes.
Yep.
But the interesting thing is that, they've moved the bar down now so that they can sell more statins. So now the bar is down to 100, which is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But anyway. And the other thing that's interesting there is that the nurse's understanding of the appropriate range of insulin from 2 to 20 is probably not accurate. I mean, really, you want your fasting. I know we've had an argument with Catherine Crofts about this, but you really want your fasting insulin to be, down below 14, or you're just not burning fat.
Yeah. Well said. So, what you got, Richard?
I've got a similar message. It was a personal message that somebody sent me on Facebook. This is from Keith, and Keith says, "Hey guys, love your podcast. I started keto 3 months ago with an A1C of 6.6, and I just got my lab results back, and I'm now 5.1.
Well done, sir.
Well done, Keith. Congratulations.
Yeah.
However, my cholesterol numbers are up. Total cholesterol was 175. It's now 258. LDL was 102. It's now 174. My HDL, that's the quote-unquote good cholesterol, as we discussed previously, that went from 38 to 59, and my triglycerides went from 156 to 121.
Wow.
I've read a little bit about the triglyceride to HDL ratio. I believe my ratio to be good. By the way, Keith, it's excellent.
Yes.
Well done.
Yeah.
Keep it up. He said. Keith goes on to say, my doctor wants to put me on statins. Oh, yeah, I also lost about 32 pounds. What advice can you give me?
Refer to previous mail.
Exactly. We really hear this a lot. It's a common pattern. The thing is that VLDL and LDL's job is to carry fat from your liver to cells that are using fat. So
right.
It's carrying, if your muscles and your peripheral cells are using fat, then that LDL's job is to carry fat to them.
Right. Previously, you were using glucose, which goes in your bloodstream because it's water soluble. But
that's right. So, fat has to travel around transit in lipoprotein boats, and LDL's job is to carry fat from your liver to cells that are using fat.
Yeah.
When you had an HbA1c of 6.6, you're mainly storing fat, so that the cells that were taking on board that fat were your adipocytes, your fat cells, and you're mainly burning glucose. So when you became fat adapted now, all your cells are in the market for fat, and your liver makes more lipoproteins. So that's one thing. But here's the important thing. Your triglycerides went down because that's how we transport around fat. And as triglycerides inside lipoproteins, that's how we transit fatty acids around the body. So your LDL is mostly full of non-triglyceride lipids, such as cholesterol.
Right.
Your HDL went up because it's consumed at a faster rate when your LDL is full of triglycerides, and no cells are in the market to draw that down.
Yeah, right.
So triglycerides over HDL are great, and that's what your doctor really should be looking at in your lipid panel. And the fact that you went from a diabetic HbA1c to non-diabetic levels, he should be utterly amazed by that, as quote unquote, everybody knows diabetes only gets worse.
That's right. And you're reversing it.
He should be saying, that's impossible. Congratulations. What did you do?
Right.
Anyway, so if your LDL goes over 200, then you would meet, this is the old diagnosing criteria for a statin, but apparently they've lowered the bar again. So statin manufacturers want to sell more of them statins. One of the world's best lipidologists, Thomas Dayspring, says under 300 LDL is not diagnostic. I disagree with him, and I consider only familial hypercholesterolemia levels of LDL are really useful. But statins are not without side effects, and I'll put in the show notes a link to my experience with statins. And I suggested to Keith, feel free to send all of this to his physician. I'm not an expert. I'm just a motivated patient who looked into this for my own health. But the bottom line is I think that Keith's results are awesome. And, if you want to know how awesome his results are, watch fix1.2keto.com and look at the difference in risk rates of all the diabetic complications, including cardiovascular disease, between somebody who's a 5.1 HbA1c and a 6.6 HbA1c.
Absolutely. And by the way, at Keto Fest this year, we're going to have a lot of talks about lipids and LDL. And we almost want to call this, the heart disease show, because there's so much talk. I mean, this is really the last kind of bugaboo that people need to get over, is this fear of fat and fear of high cholesterol. So you can get a live stream ticket to Keto Fest. Yeah,
if you can't make it out to New London, Connecticut,
that's right.
You can always live stream it and watch the shows live. We'll eventually put them on YouTube after a couple of months.
Right.
But if you want to get access to the content immediately, the best way to do that is the live stream.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So, Richard, tell me about your interview with Joe Kosterich.
So, Joe is this really outspoken, opinionated, low-carb doctor from Western Australia, who I got to meet when I was over at the Perth conference, and this is the last of the Western Australian interviews that I did. Now he's outspoken on illegalisation of marijuana, and he's very against the government getting involved in food standards and in things like dietary guidelines.
Yeah.
I don't entirely agree with him on that point, because I would like the government to at least admit that saturated fat is not a nutrient of concern, because the scientists have already admitted that. And the only way that we're going to move past this is for the government to go back on their dietary guidelines. Yeah,
the government needs to reverse course. Otherwise, everybody's going to just continue following the bad advice that they've already given us.
Yeah, well, we're going to continue to give people all the information that we have that disagrees with that.
Right.
Joe is an outspoken and very popular doctor in Western Australia, and this was an amazing interview. So
let's roll it. All right, we'll see you on the other side.
So I'm here at Low Carb Perth. We've just had a wonderful conference, and it was organised by a couple of guys, one of whom is Dr. Joe Kosterich, and I have him on the line, and we're talking about the Low Carb Conference. So welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Richard.
To the 2 Keto Dudes podcast. And so how did this conference come about?
I've been working with John Wright, who is with Metabolic Health Solutions, and both he and I went to the Low Carb Down Under conference on the Gold Coast last year, which is
an
where
excellent we met,
one, and was very, very well attended, and I think you gave a presentation there as well. And John and I came away with an idea, well, maybe we can try and do something on a slightly smaller scale in Perth. And then, as a lot of these things do, starts with an idea. We had a couple of sort of coffee meetings. Started to think, well, what might it look like in terms of a speaker roster? When can we do it? Because you've got to sort of squeeze it in before Easter. We don't want to hit the beginning of the footy season. School just started a few weeks ago. There was Low Carb Breckenridge a couple of weeks ago. So we selected on a date. Obviously, worked with Rod Taylor from Low Carb Down Under to say, well, we're wanting to put this together. And he gave us pretty much carte blanche to say, well, put a program together, flick it by me. We invited a number of speakers, both local and interstate. And as it turned out, it all just fell into place, and it was wonderful to have close to 100 people in the audience.
Yeah, it worked really well. In fact, you had a lot of, unusually for one of these low-carb conferences, you had a lot of type 1 diabetes focus, which is quite remarkable. And there were some local type 1 diabetics like Beck Johnson, who I'd never heard of before. What a fascinating story she had.
Well, her story of being diagnosed at 17 and similar to Troy Stapleton's story, going down the conventional path, this is what they tell me to do, I'll follow it and do the right thing, and then finding it's just not working, leads people onto a voyage of discovery. So I think locally, I suppose a number of people who either would have been familiar with Beck or know of her story, having swum the Rottnest Channel swim. So for people who aren't in Perth, Rottnest is about 20 kilometres off the coast of Perth, and you can swim and there's a relay swim or an individual swim. So to do that as a type 1 diabetic is an extraordinary feat.
Absolutely.
And she's the CEO of the Type 1 Institute here in Perth, which is looking to help families and particularly children with Type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, they do a remarkable job of normalising and bringing Type 1 kids together so that they can have a normal experience. And I mean, she tells a story about the pizza story where she made a pizza, with these kids, and it just reminded me that, these kids are isolated from the moment of their diagnosis. So they're unique, that they're different, and this is an opportunity for them to be in a group where they are no longer the different one, they are the normal.
Very much so. They can just, I suppose, muck in with other children in a similar situation. It's also very helpful for the parents because they can be isolated as well,
sure.
And getting learnings and experience from other parents. So that builds a community. And of course, the other thing that Beck's been fantastic in looking to develop is talking to these families and children about changing how they're eating. So rather than just eating lots of carbs and then, well, it's all right, just up your insulin to cover it.
Yeah.
The analogy is a bit like, well, look, just put some more petrol on the fire, but look, we'll pour some more water on at the other end. It's just, really does make you sort of scratch your head. So really helping with these people say, well, you can do things a different way. And it is difficult because all the institutions, most of the doctors, most of the associations are still all in lockstep. Yeah. So to have somebody like Beck running this sort of centre, providing support and advocating on behalf of a better way, or at very, very, very least, another option.
That's it. And that's it for me from type 2 diabetes. My focus in life now, my new career for the latter half of my life, is to make sure that type 2 diabetics and people with metabolic syndrome and type 1 diabetics have the option of a ketogenic diet. Because right now, if you're diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, the progress is you go to meet your CDE, your diabetes educator. They're normally an APD, and they will tell you what diet you should eat for the rest of your life. And it'll be a high carbohydrate diet. It'll be 300 grams of carbs a day. It'll be a low calorie diet to try and lose weight, because obviously getting fat gave you diabetes is in their model of the story. And so and you're going to go on that diet and you're going to be unable to control your glucose, and your disease is going to progress and get worse. And if you ever dare to, like in my case, I said to my CDE, when I was, 10 years ago, when I lived in America, I was on the Atkins diet, and that worked really well for me. Could I try that? And she said, no, well, people who have diabetes can't do Atkins because you have tighter metabolic tolerances, so you're not able to get away with something like that. And if you tell anyone else in group about that diet, we're going to kick you out of group. So it was that was... remarkable.
That really is quite extraordinary, and arguably goes to the whole crux of this issue, that people should be entitled to get information and then make a decision. And we're told from time to time, and I think this is true, that the future is going to be precision medicine.
Right.
So, in other words, at the moment, even with pharmaceuticals, we can give you a tablet for blood pressure. It's been trialled, it's found to be safe, but no pharmaceutical has ever been shown to work for 100% of people.
Right.
And nothing has ever been shown to not have side effects in 100% of people. So it's always, let's see if this works for you. The odds are in your favour, but it's not a given. The concept of precision medicine is being able to identify who might respond to a particular treatment and who might be more prone to side effects. Now, I think this is still a distance into the future. But with diet, it really works very well on the concept of what we call N=1, that says, how about you see what works for you, and you can monitor your blood sugar.
Right.
You can monitor your weight. There's a lot of things you can monitor. with the changes that you make. And there's a couple of possibilities. It's either going to bring about some improvement or it doesn't. If it does bring about improvements, you'd continue. If it didn't bring about improvement after a reasonable period of time, then you might say, well, this is not for me and I'll do something else.
Absolutely.
But this notion that anything other than the Dietitians Association / Heart Foundation / Diabetes Association's view of the world and anything else, not only is it not for you to consider, it's actually wrong and it's dangerous.
Right.
That's really, I think that's the biggest issue. Let people get information and make their own decisions.
Yeah. To be honest, at the time, I accepted it because this was the expert telling me. But then once I went away and thought about it a bit, I thought, no, I'm going to do some research and try and find out some more information about this, and that was when I ran into Tim Noakes' presentations on YouTube, and that's where he led me to Art and Science of Low Carb, and basically the ball rolled downhill from that point onwards, and I got to where I am. But had I not had, there's a lot of things that had to happen there for me to work my way into health. And so my role now, as I see it, is to be public and to be out there and talking to 100,000 people a week about what worked for me. And now maybe that won't work for them. And as you say, maybe a high carb diet will be appropriate for some people. I don't particularly care. I just want to make sure that some people have the option of what I did, because I wasn't given the option. I took it,
And that's important. And I think a problem we have in society at the moment increasingly is that there's a relatively small group of people who, such as yourself, who are prepared to say, they've told me this, it just doesn't quite sit. I'm actually going to do my own research and find out. Yeah. The majority of people have been conditioned to just accept what they're told, and they don't really feel that they can go and find out information. Right. So, and I think a really empowering message is you can look and see what you can find. There's a lot of talk about Dr. Google. Not everything on Dr. Google is right, but you know what? Not everything is wrong either. When it comes to eating, it's an interesting thing that in Australia, dietitians are not controlled by APRA, the Australian Healthcare Practitioners Regulatory Authority, because it's deemed that they can't actually do a lot of harm. I mean, unless you're severely allergic to a particular food.
Yeah, like a peanut allergy or something.
Peanut allergy, and you necessarily shouldn't eat peanuts or, those sort of things. It's... The worst thing that can happen is you eat something and it just doesn't really agree with you that well. Yeah. And if you continue to eat a particular way, well, we know that eating in a particular way and especially being on a sort of a higher carb type diet as per the dietary guidelines over the last 35 years has led us into the mess that we're in.
Well, it's a long-term chronic thing. It's a long-term thing, and we as human beings are used to when we talk about nutrition, we think about short-term goals. I'm hungry now. Am I going to get enough energy from that meal? We're not conditioned to think about, if I eat this meal and then eat it every day for 10 years, what will it do?
Exactly. And also, with very rare exceptions, there's this view, well, if you eat too much protein or eat too much fat, it's going to be bad. Yeah. And look, there was an instance, and I think it's important to say this, in the south of WA last year, a particular woman did die. She was on an extremely high protein diet, training very hard. She had a relatively obscure genetic condition that impacted on her ability to metabolize that protein. So, of course, all the usual, and that's a tragedy.
Yeah.
All the usual suspects come out.
Her mother friended me on Facebook, so I know about the story,
Come out and say, it's all to do with a high-protein diet. No, in actual fact, it's a bit like saying if you're allergic to peanuts, and it wasn't an allergy, it's a metabolism thing. Yeah. If you're allergic to peanuts and you eat them, that's going to be bad for you. It's not a problem of the peanut. It's actually just your particular body is not suited to it.
Right.
But if people, I suppose, can experiment on themselves, in 99.99999% of times, worst thing that's going to happen is it's going to find it's not working for them.
Or, I mean, in the case of eating too much protein, you'll become nauseous before you become ill. Unless you're unlucky like she was, unless you have this rare, like 1 in 8,000 instance of a disease that's not bad enough to be diagnosed as a child, but bad enough to be diagnosed in an autopsy. That's a rare case, but yeah.
Exactly. And I think also, and this is something I speak about a lot, is we don't need to take anything to extremes.
No, that's it.
So if we're on a low-carb diet and we go to an Italian restaurant, does that mean that we can never order a pasta? No, it doesn't mean that. So I think it's important that we do keep a little bit of balance, because apart from anything else, food is also to be enjoyed, and enjoyed in company, and if it's your thing, with a glass of red wine or whatever it might be, a glass of water, whatever you prefer. But I think the thing is, we can get, talk about beyond forest, beyond trees. We can sort of really get down to little sort of, things on leaves, not even the leaves, in getting very obsessed about it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that is helpful, and I don't think zealotry in any sphere, and that's in the sort of on the dietitian's side, or even some people in the low carb space can get very zealous, and I don't think that helps, because people who are in the middle, who want to maybe make some changes, they might not want to go the whole way, but they might say, look, maybe rather than having breakfast cereal, maybe I should think about having eggs. But you know what? I like a slice of toast sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's not helpful if those people are made to feel, well, they've broken all the rules, or they're not part of the group anymore.
How ketosis.
They're how dare you? It's like, well, this is working for me.
Yeah.
And we all know that people are slightly different. Some people got higher tolerances than others. Absolutely. But every so often you can have something that is sort of, in inverted commas, bad for you, because you enjoy it, and the enjoyment is actually good for you. It'll release all your happy hormones, and it'll make you feel better. So, we've just got to, we just have to keep that sort of, I know balance is a hackneyed term, but we don't want to obsess or stress about what we're eating. We want to get most of it right 80% of the time. If we do
that's a Pareto principle, yes.
Then, the rest is going to be okay.
Yes. I think for me, I choose to have a tighter tolerance, because I know one time when I was at a friend's wedding, and I decided I'm going to have half a pavlova for dessert because I feel like eating that pavlova, damn it. And I had a wonderful time, but I had a direct reaction in that my knee locked up afterwards, and I was unable to sleep for almost 24 hours because of my knee. And I don't know if it was related, but there's causal, there's mechanistic reasons why it could be related. And I just decided from that point on, I don't think I want to eat pavlova again. So
that's a perfect example of finding what works for you.
Absolutely.
And look, maybe it was causal, maybe it was coincidental.
Yeah.
Who knows? You've had that experience that's led you to make a decision, and that's working for you. And I think other people can also have experiences and find out what works for them.
Yeah.
I think the powers that be, and this is one of my little hobby horses, have sought to disempower people, especially in public health. They think everybody is an idiot and treat them as such.
Right.
Most people can actually figure out for themselves what's working best for them in their own circumstances. And the other thing is, people's circumstances change. So what worked for you 10 years ago might not still be working today. Exactly. And in 10 years' time, maybe you need something different. So these particularly these dietary guidelines, which assumes one size fits all, is about as far removed from the concept of precision medicine as it's possible to get. Broad brushstrokes, fine. Here's a start point. Here's some maybe rough percentages or some concepts you can work with. But after that, it's about adapting it to your own circumstances, and your circumstances will change because we all change over time. Yeah,
so human beings are like that. We calibrate. We find something that works for us, and when it stops working for us, we optimize. We change what we're doing slightly, and this is an innate part of the way we behave. And so I totally get that. And certainly in my case with my knee, as you say, I mean, I recalibrated. So, I found out what worked for me, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's another human on the planet it'll work for.
That's exactly right. Nobody has to tell a lion to eat zebras or gazelles. Right. They just do it. They just figure out that it works. I don't think anybody has to tell a sheep to eat grass. They just figure it out by themselves. human beings for tens of thousands of years were able to figure out what to eat. Now, immediately, and this is one of the criticisms of a paleo diet, well, people didn't live as long in those days. That's quite correct. They didn't die of heart attack and type 2 diabetes complications. There are a whole lot of other things that got them. Predators, exposure, infections, you name it. But what we see now is that the disease patterns in Western societies are 75% of the disease burden are chronic lifestyle-related conditions. So that is heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, complications of obesity, arthritis, possibly includes some mental health problems. And even some forms of cancer have not got direct nutritional cause, but there is a contribution.
Yes.
Now, if what we were eating, as per what the experts tell us, was so great, maybe we wouldn't have these problems. And it's also interesting that it's never their fault. You'll hear people come out and say, "Oh, people don't follow the guidelines." Interestingly, and nutritional surveys, they have some validity, but it's a bit like TV ratings or the old days surveys. You used to tick a box, or you watched or you didn't. But food sales figures have validity. And what food sales figures show is that people have increased their intake of grains, they've reduced their intake of eggs, dairy, red meat and full-fat products. It's the beginning of an inflection point because of community groups and people sort of figuring out for themselves. But this notion that people haven't followed the guidelines and that's why we have these problems is actually fundamentally wrong as per food sales figures. And that's something statistics people can argue with, but sales figures are what they are.
Yeah, they are. And for people who argue that we're not following the guidelines, that is a cognitive dissonance. That is not accepting the fact that possibly the guidelines could be wrong. Evidently, the guidelines must be right, and therefore there must be another explanation.
And it's extraordinary sometimes that people who are obviously well educated and you would think reasonably intelligent are just have either blind spots or they're blinkered or they're just so wrapped up in their own ideology and their own worldview that they can't even countenance that maybe something is wrong. The whole concept of scientific sort of theory and experiment is you start from the position that what you believe is wrong. And you've got to try and prove whether it might be right. That has now been turned on its head in a number of areas with the view that everything we say is right, and anybody who challenges it must be wrong for no other reason that they challenge it. And then worse than that, not only people it is wrong, they need to be silenced, and we've seen evidence of that.
Absolutely.
And they're dangerous. I get Pete Evans is not everybody's cup of tea for a variety of reasons. I've met him a couple of times. He's a lovely
nice guy.
Lovely guy. And that doesn't mean I agree with everything he says, but he's a nice guy. And when he says eat lots of vegetables and good quality fats and proteins, which is the core of a paleo type diet, I don't really see this as being the devil incarnate.
No.
Equally, his...
Not worth mockery. I mean, this is the mockery that he gets online. And our international audience probably won't know him, but he's a famous chef in Australia who has this TV show, and he has hate groups devoted on the internet to mocking him and putting him up for ridicule. And that itself is ridiculous.
And, for example, in a paleo diet, it doesn't include dairy. In keto diet, it includes dairy. As we spoke before, find what works for you.
Exactly.
And if you wanted to adopt a broadly paleo type approach, because that's your preferred thing for low carb, but you know what? You wanted to have some dairy in it, it's okay. If you were keto and you happened to be lactose intolerant and dairy doesn't really work for you, then you can still be keto, but you need to find something else, which gets back to finding what works for you within these broader parameters. But when we have insulin metabolism, and as you know, insulin is responsible, amongst other things, for fat storage, and carbs cause insulin release. So for people who are trying to lose weight, if they're putting in something that will cause the body to go into fat storage mode, it's probably not going to work very well. And if you have diabetes, which is and this is type 1 or 2, there are problems with carbohydrate regulation, either because you're not producing enough insulin in type 1 or you're producing too much and you've just switched off to it in type 2. The more carbohydrate that you put into your system, clearly that can't be a good thing, but yet you'll get people say, oh, increase your carb intake and then use more insulin. And I find that an extraordinary stance for people to take, because from the proverbial person from Mars came here, they would say, well, if you're having to use B to offset the effects of A, why wouldn't you have less of A so you might not need as much of B?
Right.
You know, doesn't that seem to be sort of, instead of saying, look, I'll smash this window, but I've got some sticky tape and we put it back together.
Right.
Why not smash it in the first place?
Yeah, especially when you can establish that exposure to insulin causes all of these horrible things. What you're doing with the high carbohydrate diet in the case of a type 1 diabetic is you're requiring them to have more insulin. And because a type 1 diabetic, they have a big bolus of insulin that releases over time. A non-type 1 diabetic has pulsatile insulin that goes up and down to avoid resistance. So making somebody who has type 1 inject so much insulin increases the chance that they're going to get type 2 diabetes, and there's nothing worse than type 1 and type 2 in the same body. That's a horrible place to be.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And then the as we spoke before, the almost virulent opposition, and you found that from your own experience, to saying, well, maybe there's another option that you could try or think about or see how it works on your sugars. And, for example, Troy spoke at the conference, and Beck Johnson, you mentioned, also spoke at the conference. Their own experience, their sugar markers improved when they changed their diet.
Yeah.
I think anybody out there who sees an improvement in markers that they're trying to improve after they've made some sort of change or intervention are going to feel that that's a good thing for them.
Yeah.
And I think for any practitioner to tell a person like that that's the wrong thing when they brought about some improvement, I think that there's a real ethical consideration in that.
Yeah. And Troy actually showed his metal bento boxes with the food that he eats. That's hardly harsh. That looked delicious, the food that he's eating. So,
had some salmon. I think you might have a bit of leftover steak or something from the night before. He had some avocado.
Almonds,
he had some berries and cheese. This is normal food.
Yeah,
this is actually normal food.
Yeah.
And I think Troy paraphrased Michael Pollan, and I would sort of do the same.
I agree with that. Yeah,
Eat real or whole, WHOLE food.
Right.
Food that doesn't actually have ingredients. An almond doesn't have ingredients. It hasn't been manufactured somewhere. Neither does a berry, neither does an avocado, neither does an egg, neither does a piece of salmon.
And don't eat too often was the other thing he got, which is so much better than not too much. Mm-hmm. Michael Pollan's not too much. I mean, we have a satiety hunger signalling for a reason, because we adequately fuel ourselves. And so Troy's modification was eat real food, plenty of meat, and not too often. And that's perfect. Much better way of saying it.
And my take on that is eat foods that until not that long ago were either growing somewhere or moving around somewhere.
Right.
And if you do that, then how much or how frequently you're going to need to eat can be determined by what your body's telling you rather than the clock.
Yeah.
And I think what people find is when they go on to a lower carb type diet, they don't get as hungry.
Yeah.
One of the other real problems with the high carb diet and the dietary guidelines and what we've seen is people get up in the morning, they have, some toast and some breakfast cereal because that's what they've been told, and up goes their sugar levels, up goes their insulin levels, 2 hours later down goes their sugar levels, followed by their insulin levels, and then they're hungry again.
Yeah.
And then, what am I going to eat now? Oh, what's available? A Bicky or a muffin, you're at work.
Yeah.
And this cycle goes around and around and around, and you're in constant fat storage mode and you're constantly hungry. Once you're eating foods that, I suppose, fill you up and give you that satiety and give you nutrition as well, because there's pretty minimal nutrition in a lot of these high-carb processed foods, then you're not really having to count calories. No. You're not having to watch what you eat. You're being guided by what works for you.
Yeah. In my case today, it's currently 2 p.m. We're recording this. So I woke up about 7 o'clock and I didn't eat. I had an espresso, and then I went for a ride. I did the bridge to bridge with with Jessica Turton, and we just hired a bike, and it was a lovely day out in Perth to go for a ride. And I haven't eaten anything all day, and I'm not hungry now. I may have something about 7 or 8 o'clock. I'll go to the lounge at the airport on the way home, and I don't feel any hunger. I don't feel any reactive hypoglycemia. My body is perfectly fueled all day, so it works very well for me, and that's only because I'm fat fueled. If I was on a carb based diet, I'd be eating 6 times a day. You know,
because your body's telling you that it has enough energy because it's burning the energy that you have. And for people who are wanting weight loss, then that's exactly what they want to be doing. They want to be using the energy that's been stored rather than putting in more energy. So you're not using the energy that's been stored. Yeah. And I will say, my sort of ideas about fasting have sort of changed or are changing. Again, I think one has to be guided by what works for you rather than a number of hours or a number of days.
Totally.
When you're hungry, eat, but just because it's 7 o'clock doesn't mean you have to. Yeah. I find increasingly, and look, if you'd have asked me this 2 years ago, I'd have said, look, it's important to eat breakfast. And I always used to be on my kids' back about it.
I thought that too, yeah.
As and this is what we're all told. And you sort of think, well, it sort of seems to make sense. But I find a lot of days now I will eat 2 meals a day, sometimes 1 meal a day. And you don't get hungry. And sometimes at lunchtime, you sort of think, am I hungry or is it just at lunchtime and I think I should be having something to eat?
So I've made this case several times that lunchtime is a myth and breakfast time is doubly so a myth. It's really when you feel hungry, eat. Mindful eating, that's what it's about. It's about mindfully listening to the signals that your body's producing. And right now I'm not hungry, so I'm not going to eat.
And that's exactly the right thing to be doing. Look, on Friday, I think I made it through the day again just because it got really quite busy. Yeah. I think I had a protein bar that I did have somewhere through the day, again with that sort of half thinking, do I need this or don't I need it? Yeah. And then Friday night was my daughter's birthday through the week, so we went out and had a very nice steak and some veg at a restaurant, and that was particularly good. But it's not just the food. Lovely spot to go to, celebratory occasion. There's also that enjoyment side of food.
And that's the other point you were making,
sometimes you can eat when you're not that hungry. You don't want to do it all the time because it does lead to troubles, absolutely. But, now and again, you're actually doing it because you enjoy it. It's a bit like you enjoy a sunset or, you might enjoy a walk in the park. There are certain things that we can do as humans because we actually enjoy it. It's a treat. And once upon a time, treats were something we did occasionally. We're now at the stage where treats have become something we do 3 times a day, and that's the problem.
Yeah, yes, it is. So I'm curious about how your advice for people who on managing their doctor and working with their doctor to improve their health goals.
Yeah, look, that's difficult. And doctors, I suppose, like dietitians, like a lot of people, are also influenced and conditioned by what they've been taught. And also, unfortunately, in medicine, it used to be that people could go to their doctor, the doctor could provide you with information, ideas, and I suppose manage you as an individual and based on their knowledge. Now we have guidelines and protocols, and increasingly doctors are expected to basically do things in some cookie-cutter model because certain people in high places have decreed it. And, as we know, we've seen instances where doctors have deviated from that and have suffered consequences. Yeah. I think we're also at a little bit of a tipping point with that. Wow. And look, it's a little bit how you go about it. So, look, for individuals, it is about going to your doctor and saying, look, this is an approach I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. No doctor's going to be very pleased to see you come in with sort of, 3 reams of printed out internet things. So if you can come in with a little bit of info and say, look, this is what I've found, this is what path I want to go down, and look, I fully understand that it's not conventional, and I fully understand that, I'm making an informed decision. Yeah. And those are the key words, because no doctor wants to get sued or have the regulatory bodies crawling all over them. So as soon as we're in that situation where we've had a discussion and the individual really does understand what they're doing, then ultimately it'll be about the results. And I think a lot of doctors who are moving towards a greater acceptance of low carb, it's sometimes been because they've actually learnt from their patients. And in the practice of medicine, a bit like the practice of law, you do learn as you go
That's how it
along.
should
You don't
happen,
leave medical school with all the knowledge. In fact, you leave with sort of a bit less than you think you've probably had. So you do, and then you sort of think, well, if this has worked for this person, why has it? And then another person comes in the same. And I think there are a number of docs who've, probably Troy's an example of that, who found through their own experience that it's worked for them. So
that was the pathway for Eric Westman, and he's one of the early researchers in low-carb diets for Dr. Atkins. One of the pathway for him was somebody came in and their health had dramatically improved, and it turned out that they'd gone on a low-carb diet, and he was just curious, and he dug into it, and it became a career for him.
So it is about having that conversation and saying, look, I don't want to turn everything on its head, but I want to make some changes, and this is the way I want to go about it. And can we monitor and see what happens? Look, there are also instances where sometimes, and I'm not saying this is the first thing to do, but look, there sometimes are instances where people do need to change doctors if you're really going nowhere with it. I think there's a spectrum in medicine from those who are extremely in with the sort of official view to those who are the radicals.
Yeah.
And probably everybody else is somewhere in the middle that genuinely they want the best outcome for the patients. If you're coming in to see your doctor, they genuinely want the best health outcome for you, but they also will have a view based on what they've been told and taught and heard that there's a way to go about that. So it's often frustrating for doctors as well that things aren't just going as according to plan.
Yeah.
So to come in as an informed patient and say, I think this is something this is a path I want to go down, and can we see how it goes? Then that's really about that informed discussion and decision making.
Right. So it's you go in with enough information to explain about what you're interested in doing. Absolve the doctor by saying that you have informed consent, that this is what you want to do, and you've done some research, and you want their advice to make sure that you do it safely and that it's monitored and that's appropriate.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to physicians who have a patient come to them with that kind of, is there anything specific that a doctor should do?
Look, first thing is don't get too spooked and don't get afraid of it. Do a little bit of your own research. There's no shortage of research out there, and you don't have to read 50,000 papers. The Pure study is probably the best one, which was 130,000 people in 18 countries over about 7 or 8 years, showed conclusively that carbohydrates in the diet were associated with increased rates of cardiovascular disease, and fats in the diet were not.
And saturated was benign.
Was not a problem.
Yeah.
There was another fairly big study in about 2012, I think Rob Lustig might have been one of the authors of that, showing that type 2 diabetes was a function of sugar intake, not weight. So sugar contributed, and this we're talking about, again, refined carbs, so it's not just the sugar in your tea or coffee, it's all refined carbs. Yeah. Contributed to obesity, obviously through the effects of insulin and fat storage, and to type 2 diabetes. But it wasn't being obese that led to type 2 diabetes. Right. It was the intake of refined carbs. And there was another massive study. It was 100 and something countries over, again, a 7 to 10 year period. So the doctors will say, well, is there any research out there? Yeah, there is. And
you just have to go looking for it, I'm afraid.
You have to sort of maybe do a little bit of a search for it. So there's a lot of talk over the last 25 years about what's called evidence-based medicine. We're meant to do everything that has evidence. And it's good and it's bad. The good thing is you can find evidence for just about anything you want.
Oh dear.
So in this particular case, it is a good thing, because if anybody does query it, you can really say, look, here is the evidence. You asking me what I'm doing, does it have as a doctor, does it have an evidence base? Yeah, there is an evidence base, and it's a pretty solid one. The fact that public health and government haven't caught on to it doesn't mean that it's not a strong evidence base.
Right, that's a good call, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Joe. It's been I had a great time yesterday. One of the best conferences I've been to in terms of the content. And it was unusual for me because I wasn't used to such a high amount of type 1. And we had 2 really strong stories about type 1, but we also had stories about a lot of PhDs getting into type 1 and the ketogenic diet. And that it really is something that's lacking, is good evidence for type 1. So great conference, and met some fascinating people and done some wonderful podcast, and thank you for the invitation. I do appreciate it.
Richard, it's a pleasure. Thanks for your kind words about the conference, and thanks for the opportunity to be on your show.
Thank you.
Heard you say you're due for a little.
Wow, that was great, Richard. You know, Joe's caution against being too zealous really resonated with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, the most important thing you can do is cut sugar and starch. And as he says, get your happy hormones working and your body will heal itself. We don't have to be so precise. It's just in our nature, especially where diet and nutrition is concerned, to want to measure everything because we think, you know, if we follow the protocol to the T, that's the only time it's going to work. And it probably comes from us being disappointed by, you know, thinking we failed at following other protocols in the past.
Yeah, I think once we get the sugar and starch out of the picture and it's no longer deranging us, our bodies find a good homeostasis where we move to a healthy place. So.
Yeah, that was great. Well, are you peckish?
I'm a little bit puckish.
All right, well then let's do some recipes. Yeah. Recipes.
I'm just going to let you hang on that one.
Okay.
What do you got, Carl?
Well, as you know, I did a Ketoki fried chicken night here at my house, a Keto Mini Fest a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. So you did fried chicken, and you've done coleslaw. And you did, and the chocolate parfait, right?
Right. Yeah. I haven't done the recipe for the chocolate parfait yet, and I will get to that. But now I'm going to do biscuits.
Cookies, right?
Well, you call them cookies. They're not cookies, actually. Biscuit is, in the United States, is a word for the closest thing I can think of in the UK, anyway, is a scone. But it's
scone. Yeah.
But it's savory, and it's, you know, buttery, and you generally eat it with gravy in the U.S., but and I'll get to the gravy as well. Anyway, it's a very easy recipe. It's essentially 2 cups of almond flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, half a teaspoon of salt, 2 large beaten eggs, and 1/3 of a cup of butter melted. Of course, you can use coconut oil if you want to. It has a, you know, when it solidifies, it's got a more crispy texture than butter, but butter tastes so good. So it's pretty simple. You preheat the oven to 350 Fahrenheit or 177 Celsius. You mix the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients in separate bowls, and you combine them, and it makes this really thick batter. Now, what I do is, well, first of all, you're going to line a cookie sheet with parchment paper, or if you have cookie sheets that just nothing sticks to, I got some new ones. They're amazing. You don't need parchment. So here's what you do. Use an ice cream scoop, and you know the kind that has the thumb release that has a little arc that scrapes the inside? That's what you want, you know? And you don't want a big one. You want a tinier one, a small one. And you basically use that ice cream scoop to scoop out individual biscuits. And it makes about 10. So I could make 20 or so on a big sheet with a double recipe.
Right.
And you bake them for about 15 minutes or until they're just starting to turn golden brown. You know, use the thumb test too. If you push on them and you get goop, you got to leave them in a little bit longer. But you don't definitely don't want to overcook them. You just want them golden brown. Right. And they're the best when they come right out of the oven. You let them sit for a few hours and they cool off. They're not as good. You serve them hot. And that's it, man. Everybody loved them, by the way. They were a big hit.
I actually want to try some of these. I know in England there is a famous breakfast called Devonshire tea, which is scone, which is similar thing to a biscuit.
Right.
Cut in half, filled with clotted cream and strawberry jam or raspberry jam.
Yeah.
But I can imagine actually just fresh raspberries, maybe or sliced strawberry slices, and then a little bit of clotted cream or triple cream or the cream of the cream.
Very nice.
Very nice.
So what do you got, my friend?
So I've got a recipe that I've actually eaten for the past 2 nights, and I've put pictures on my Facebook stream, and I will be putting together a recipe on our blog post for it.
Okay.
It's actually butter poached sous vide ribeye.
Oh.
And this was I've done sous vide steak before, but this is a recipe that I did for our buddy Dan Quibble, who wanted a 2 Keto Dudes recipe to talk about in his group.
Mr. Bacon Suit. Shout out to Dan.
Yeah. And so he asked us, do we have anything with sous vide? And I thought, I've got a couple of Wagyu steaks sitting in my fridge, aging nicely.
Right.
So, and I have a sous vide stick, so I'm going to do that. Now, the interesting thing about whenever I talk about sous vide, people complain about fancy cooking. That's fancy stuff that you're doing. It's actually the easiest way to get the perfect doneness of steak.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be too expensive either. We use the Innova sous vide sticks, which are a couple $100.
$180 Australian, so they're probably $150 US. So this is nothing. So what they do is they circulate water. They heat it up and circulate water so that you get a bath of water to a constant temperature. Right. And then you can take your steak. So here's how I cook these steaks. So first of all, I put a steak on a wooden board and I let it come to room temperature. Yeah. I season it with a little bit of salt and pepper on both sides, and I put it in a plastic bag, and I get as much of the air out of the bag as I can and seal the bag. Now, you can use a Ziploc bag. You don't have to have fancy vacuuming equipment. I use the fancy vacuuming equipment because what I'm trying to do is to have no air in the bag to insulate the steak from the temperature of the water bath.
Correct. Yeah.
So normally when you cook a steak on a hot pan, the heat of the pan starts moving through the steak, and then you flip the steak and do the other side, and the heat then starts moving up from the other side, and then you take the steak off, you let it rest, and then you serve it. But what happens is you get a gradient from really well done to maybe medium rare in the middle.
Yep.
You're going through different stages of that temperature because the temperature is moving its way through the steak.
Right.
What a sous vide does is it allows you to cook at a lower temperature for a much longer time so that the whole steak from end to end is medium rare.
Yes.
Or in the case of the one that I did last night, is rare to very rare.
Oh.
Okay, so yeah. And so but it cooks it perfectly. So you know that end to end the steak is absolutely perfect. So I cook it, if you want it rare, it's very rare. You're going to cook it at about 51.5 degrees Celsius, and you're going to cook it for about an hour. And that hour is going to allow the temperature to equilibrate through the entire steak. So the entire steak will be done to the precise degree that you want it to be.
Nice.
If you want your steak to be medium well, then it's going to be a hotter temperature. If you want it medium rare, it's going to be like 54 degrees Celsius. And if you get in an overstick, those temperatures, there's an app that comes with it, and you just go down to steak, ribeye, and what kind of doneness that you want, and it will tell you what temperature you need to do it at.
Perfect.
So now at the end of this process, your steak's been sitting there for an hour it's been having a lovely warm bath, getting to perfect rare to very rare in the middle.
Yeah.
And so what you then do is 5 minutes before it's coming out of its bath, put a cast iron pan on the stove, crank it, and you're going to have to put on your fan because this is going to get very smoky. And your smoke alarm is going to go off if you don't have your fan running in advance. We're going to get this pan 5 minutes of full-on heat to really get to temperature. It's going to be hot.
Smoking hot.
Smoking. So then what you do is you take the steak out of the bag, and it's got like a jelly consistency.
Yeah.
And the fat has actually you'll notice that the fat has almost become jello-like instead of being sort of hard to the touch. It's become almost jello-like. Just as a tip, if you cook steak for an hour at the perfect temperature, all of that fat, the proteins in the fat that used to be unpalatable become essentially gelatin.
The connective tissue breaks down.
Yeah. It breaks down from collagen to gelatin, and that fat becomes delicious. But anyway, I digress. So you've got the steak. It's just come out of the bag. It's going to be slightly wet. So we're going to dry it off because we don't want to put it in a hot pan when it's slightly wet. So we'll dry it off with a paper towel. And then you put it on the pan and you do nothing to it for a minute. You just let it sit there.
Right.
It's going to be tortured on a very, very hot, rolling cast iron pan.
And the reason that you want it so hot is you want it to crisp up and crust the outside without spending so much time as it actually heats up the rest of the steak.
Yeah, we only want the outside of the steak to be brown. We want the inside of the steak to be its perfect medium rare or whatever, very rare. So anyway, once you've cooked it on one side, and this is a pan with no fat in it. We haven't put any fat in the pan. We're not seasoning it. It's going into a hot cast iron pan. Flip it over, and now the second side is going to get the same treatment for 1 minute.
Yep.
And what you're going to do now is you're going to put in about 15 grams of butter and a sprig of thyme and a sprig of rosemary.
Nice.
Okay? And you're going to get a spoon. And so we now have the top side of the steak is the one that was first down on the pan. So now what we're going to do is we're going to tip the pan slightly, and for a minute, while the bottom side is getting its first blast, we're going to be spooning that melting frying butter over the top of the steak with all of the aromats, with the thyme and the rosemary. We're going to be spooning them over the top of the steak.
That's a French technique that they've been using over there for hundreds of years.
Yeah, I think the French are probably using it for thousands of years. I'm sure there's a cave painting somewhere about some Frenchman using this technique on mammoth steaks. But anyway, so basically what you're doing is you're spooning this frying hot butter onto the top of the steak, and the milk solids and the surface of the steak combine deliciously.
Yes.
And so, we've been there a minute. Now we're going to turn the steak over again. Some of the butter is now going to get to the underside.
Yeah.
And we do it for another minute. We keep ladling the spoon of butter on top of the steak, and then get some tongs, take the steak out, put it on a board, and let it sit there for a good 5 minutes just to rest. And
if you're concerned about it getting too cold, you can tent it with some aluminum foil just to keep the heat in.
Put a little basket over the top of it, Now you've got all of this pan full of butter. It's sort of like steak-flavored butter with aromats. So what are we going to do with that? Here's what I'm going to do with that. I'm going to get about a quarter of a cup of red wine.
Yes.
I'm going to pour it into this sizzling hot butter. Then get a whisk, and I'm going to whisk it. And what that's going to do is it's going to pull any fond that's on the base of the pan. That's where all the flavour is. Off the bottom of the pan. The alcohol is going to boil off. The water is going to boil off. And what you're going to end up with is an emulsified sauce, essentially a red wine jus.
Yeah. You could throw a little fresh garlic in there too. And that's a good time to do that because it's not going to burn.
Yeah. I put a bit of fresh garlic. I put a little bit of mushrooms in it. I put some spinach in. And I'm basically wilting spinach in red wine jus. And then I just use a slotted spoon to scoop all the spinach off and put that on the side of the plate next to the steak. So what I've actually done is I've turned spinach into meat-flavored spinach, which is awesome. And then you just pour the liquid into a gravy boat. And here's the thing. We always talk about eat fat to satiety.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to want the same amount of fat. So the fat is in the sauce. It's in the gravy boat.
Yep.
So if you're the kind of person who would look at that meal and think, well, that's not going to be enough for me, you can add a little bit of that fatty sauce.
That's right.
If you're the kind of person who says, well, that's going to fill me up nicely, don't add the fatty sauce.
Don't add the sauce.
That's how you do fat to satiety. You put it in the sauce.
The most delicious way to do keto is right here with the dudes. What a great show. That's awesome, Richard.
Of course, if you have anything you want to tell us, something we said wrong, something you don't agree with, some more research that you found to support or refute anything that we've said, send it by email to dudes@2ketodudes.com or post it on our website.
And you can follow us on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Instagram at 2ketodudes. Make sure to use the hashtag 2ketodudes.
And of course, if you want to join the free ketogenic forum, it's forum.2keto.com. And you can have a look around the ketogenic forum without needing to create an account by starting with success.2keto.com.
That's our huge success story page. Someday you can add yours to it. And if useless swag is your fancy, t-shirts, coffee mugs, and all that other junk with witty keto sayings on them, head over to gear.2keto.com.
And if you want a shot at getting some of that swag for free, join the 2 Keto Dudes fan club. You'll be eligible to win something in every show. Go to fanclub.2keto.com.
And if you feel like supporting our forums and all the podcasts we produce, think about making a monthly pledge on our Patreon page at patreon.2keto.com.
And come to Keto Fest 2018. We're going to have a party. Go to ketofest.com.
Yeah, and you can also see our podcasts and other videos on YouTube at youtube.2keto.com, and check out my cooking videos at carlsketokitchen.com.
And if you haven't already, go leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That's how new people get to know about what we do.
2 Keto Dudes is brought to you by 2 Keto LLC, who strives to support the low-carb community with podcasts and other publications. My friend, keep calm, keto on, and fast when you can.
Yeah, Carl, keep calm, keto on, and Keto Fest in just about 2 weeks, or join the live stream.
That's right. All right, and we'll see you next time on 2 Keto Dudes.